They say family is everything. But what happens when everything becomes nothing in the span of 60 seconds at an airport gate? I stood there watching my own blood walk away. Their backs turned on 38 years of memories, and I couldn't believe what was actually happening right in front of my eyes. The truth about betrayal isn't that it hurts. It's that it happens in slow motion while you're still trying to convince yourself you're imagining it, still making excuses for people who stopped loving you long before they finally showed it. My sister was laughing as she canceled my ticket home, actually laughing, and in that moment, I realized that family drama isn't just arguments at Thanksgiving. It's warfare disguised as concern. It's theft wrapped in worry. It's destruction delivered with tears they practiced in the mirror. What happened next changed everything. I thought I knew about revenge, justice, and what it really means to reclaim your dignity when the people who gave you life try to take everything else away. The shocking reality is that I was humiliated, mocked, and shamed by my own family in the most public way possible. Stripped of my phone, my passport, my ticket, my dignity, abandoned in a foreign country like I was garbage they couldn't wait to dispose of. They backstabbed me so thoroughly, with such calculated precision, that part of me had to admire the efficiency even as my world was collapsing around me. But here's the secret nobody tells you about hitting rock bottom. Sometimes that's exactly where you meet the people who'll help you build an empire on top of the ruins. A billionaire in an expensive suit whispered a proposal that sounded insane, a deal that should have been a red flag parade. But desperation makes you see opportunities where common sense sees danger. "Trust me," he said, and I had absolutely no reason to, except that I had nothing left to lose and everything to gain from the kind of payback that would make my family regret the day they thought I was weak enough to destroy. Then something happened that nobody saw coming, least of all me. Revenge stopped being about making them pay and started being about making myself whole. The infidelity to family bonds that I'd experienced became the foundation for building something real, with someone who understood that being cheated, lied to, and betrayed by blood doesn't make you broken. It makes you a survivor with nothing left to prove, except to yourself. This isn't just a story about getting even, though believe me, the karma that caught up with my family was beautiful and brutal, and exactly what they deserved. This is about what happens when you stop playing victim and start playing chess, when you realize that the ultimate form of justice isn't destruction. It's becoming so successful, so happy, so completely untouchable, that their attempts to hurt you become irrelevant background noise in your extraordinary life. Exposed, revealed, and forced to face the consequences of their greed, my family learned a lesson I'd already mastered. That dignity can't be stolen if you refuse to hand it over, and sometimes the best revenge isn't payback at all. I couldn't believe what was happening right there at JFK Airport. My own family, the people I'd trusted my entire life, were actually walking away from me. My sister Rachel grabbed my phone from my hands while my brother Michael snatched my passport, their eyes cold and distant, like I was some stranger they'd never met before. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife could have ever reached, slicing through every memory we'd ever shared together. "You're too selfish, Emma," my mother hissed, her words dripping with venom I'd never heard before in my 38 years. The shocking truth was crystallizing right there in Terminal 4. This wasn't a spontaneous argument. This was planned, calculated, deliberate. My father stood there silent, avoiding my desperate gaze as Rachel typed furiously on her phone, canceling my return ticket to Los Angeles with terrifying efficiency. The money from Grandma's estate should have been divided equally, but you always were her favorite. Michael spat, his face twisted with resentment I'd been blind to for years. They'd brought me to Paris under the pretense of a family vacation, a chance to heal old wounds and reconnect after Grandma Rose's passing. But this whole trip had been a trap. A humiliating setup designed to leave me stranded and powerless, stripped of everything that could get me home. The familia drama I'd tried so hard to avoid my whole life was now exploding right in front of hundreds of travelers rushing past us. "You can't just leave me here," I shouted, my voice cracking as panic seized my chest. But they were already backing away toward the security checkpoint. Rachel actually smirked. She smirked, as she tucked my phone into her designer purse like it was some kind of trophy she'd won. My mother's last words echoed in my ears. "Maybe being alone will teach you some humility, Emma." the dignidad I'd always carried, the self-worth I'd built through years of therapy and personal growth, felt like it was crumbling beneath my feet. They backstabbed me in the most public, devastating way possible, leaving me in a foreign country without resources, without allies, without even a way to call for help. I stood there frozen, watching their backs disappear into the crowd, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might explode right out of my chest. Other passengers were staring now, probably wondering what kind of person gets abandoned by their entire family in an international airport. The shame washed over me in waves, hot and suffocating, making my skin burn with humiliation I'd never experienced before. This was supposed to be about healing, about coming together after loss, but instead they'd turned Grandma's death into an opportunity for revenge over imagined slights. The infidelity to our family bonds, the way they'd lied about their intentions, left me feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my entire life. My legs gave out, and I sank onto a nearby bench, my hands shaking uncontrollably as the reality of my situation crashed down on me like a tidal wave. No phone, no passport, no ticket, no way home. Just my carry-on bag with some clothes and about 200 euros in my wallet. The reclaiming of my life that I'd worked so hard for after my divorce seemed like a cruel joke now. All that progress destroyed in one vicious moment. I was stranded in Paris, cheated out of my dignity by the very people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But as I sat there trying to catch my breath, I noticed someone watching me from across the terminal. A tall man in an expensive suit, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite read yet. The man approached slowly, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the airport floor with a confidence that seemed almost out of place in this chaotic terminal. "Forgive me for intruding, but I couldn't help noticing your situation," he said, his voice smooth and measured, like he'd rehearsed this moment 1,000 times before. His eyes were piercing blue, the kind that seemed to see straight through all the walls I'd carefully built around myself over the years. "My name is Christian Beaumont, and I have a proposition that might sound absolutely insane, but I promise you, it could solve both of our problems." I looked up at him through tear-blurred vision, every instinct screaming that this was too convenient, too perfect, too much like a scene from a movie. He sat down beside me without asking permission, pulling out a thick leather wallet and flashing what looked like an American Express Centurion card. "I need a wife. Well, not a real wife, but someone who can pretend to be my wife for the next year," Christian explained, his words tumbling out faster now. The shocking audacity of this stranger's proposal should have sent me running, but I was trapped, desperate, and frankly out of options at this point. "I'll fly you back to the States first class tonight, put $50,000 in your account by morning, and provide you a penthouse in Manhattan," he continued, watching my reaction carefully. The betrayal I'd just experienced made his offer sound less like charity and more like karma, finally swinging back in my direction. "Why me?" I managed to whisper, my throat still tight from crying, my mind racing through 1,000 possibilities of what this could mean. Christian leaned back, his expression shifting from businessman to someone carrying his own heavy burden of family drama and manipulation. "Because you look like someone who just got backstabbed by the people closest to her. And honestly, that's exactly my situation too," he admitted, his vulnerability catching me completely off guard. His younger brother was trying to force him out of their family's luxury hotel empire, using Christian's 3-year widowhood as evidence he was too emotionally unstable to lead. The justice he was seeking wasn't about money. It was about dignity, about proving he wasn't broken, about reclaiming control of the legacy he'd built with his late wife. I studied his face, searching for signs of deception, for the kind of lies my family had hidden behind loving smiles just minutes ago. "This sounds completely insane. You realize that, right?" I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I was already calculating the angles, weighing my options. Christian nodded, pulling out his phone and showing me photos of legal documents, news articles about Beaumont hotels, pictures of a stunning penthouse with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. "I have a lawyer, Marcus Sullivan, who'll draw up an ironclad contract protecting both of us. Your autonomy, your safety, your image, everything," he assured me. The infidelity my family had shown to our bonds made me realize I didn't owe loyalty to blood anymore. I owed it to myself, to my survival, to my future. I need to think about... I started. But Christian gently interrupted, checking his watch with the urgency of someone who understood time was running out. The last flight to New York leaves in 90 minutes, and I have 2 first-class seats booked, he said, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity that was both unsettling and strangely comforting. The vengeance brewing in my chest wasn't hot and explosive. It was cold, calculated, and hungry for the kind of power that would make my family regret every second of what they'd done. Look, Emma. Yes, I know your name. I heard them shouting it. This isn't charity. This is a business deal between 2 people who got cheated by life, Christian said, standing and offering his hand. Something in his words resonated deep in my bones, like the universe was presenting me with an opportunity disguised as desperation. As I reached for his hand, I realized this strange billionaire might just be the key to a payback my family would never see coming. I took Christian's hand and felt something shift inside me. Not romance, but recognition. Like 2 soldiers who'd survived different battles suddenly finding themselves fighting the same war. Within 40 minutes, we were boarding that flight, his assistant having somehow magically produced a temporary travel document that got me through security without my passport. The first-class cabin felt like stepping into another dimension, one where betrayal hadn't just destroyed my entire world an hour ago. Christian handed me a glass of champagne before takeoff, his expression serious but not unkind, like he understood the weight of what I was about to agree to. Once we land, Marcus will have the contracts ready. Read every word, negotiate anything you want. This has to work for both of us, he said, and I couldn't believe how surreal this moment was. During the 8-hour flight, Christian explained his situation in detail, and the parallels to my own family drama were almost haunting in their similarity. His brother Nathan had been spreading rumors about Christian's mental state, claiming grief had made him reckless with company decisions, painting him as unstable and unfit to lead. The shocking cruelty of family using your pain as a weapon against you. I knew that feeling intimately now. It was still burning fresh in my chest. Nathan's filing for an emergency board review next month trying to get me removed as CEO, Christian explained, his jaw tightening with barely controlled anger. The revenge he was planning wasn't loud or destructive. It was strategic, using the very respectability and stability his brother claimed he lacked as the ultimate proof. A wife, a stable marriage, a united front. It would dismantle Nathan's entire narrative before the board meeting even happened. But as Christian talked, I realized this deal was offering me something even more valuable than $50,000 or a fancy apartment in Manhattan. When we land, what's your first move? He asked, and I felt my own strategic mind kicking into gear for the first time since the airport nightmare. I told him about my family's probable next steps. They'd taken my documents because they were planning something bigger, something legal that required me to be out of the picture. Christian's eyes narrowed, his business instincts clearly recognizing the same patterns of manipulation he'd experienced with Nathan. Conservatorship. We both said at the same time, the word hanging in the air like a death sentence. And suddenly, this wasn't just about his company anymore. The truth hit me like ice water. My family hadn't just abandoned me to teach me a lesson. They'd abandoned me to create a narrative of instability. How long had I been missing before they'd file paperwork claiming I was incompetent, mentally unwell, unable to manage my own affairs? Grandma Rose's condo in Santa Monica, worth at least $3 million, had been left solely to me in her will because she knew I was the only one who'd preserve her legacy. The dignity she'd shown me, the self-worth she'd helped me build after my divorce, was exactly what my siblings wanted to destroy so they could claim I was unfit to inherit. Christian watched the realization play across my face, then pulled out his phone and started typing rapidly. Marcus specializes in family law and asset protection. By tomorrow morning, we'll have a full defensive strategy ready, he promised, his support feeling more genuine than anything my blood relatives had offered in years. As the plane descended into JFK, I stared out the window at the glittering lights of New York City, feeling something dangerous and powerful awakening inside me. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was war. And I'd just found an unexpected ally with resources I'd never dreamed of having. Christian looked over at me, a slight smile playing at his lips like he could read exactly what I was thinking. "They're going to regret underestimating you," he said quietly, and the certainty in his voice sent shivers down my spine. The humiliation I'd felt just hours ago was transforming into fuel, into focus, into a determination that scared even me. We landed in New York at midnight, and as we stepped off that plane, I knew my old life was gone forever. But maybe, just maybe, the new one would be so much better than anything my family had tried to steal from me. The penthouse Christian had promised wasn't an exaggeration. It was a glass and marble sanctuary 50 stories above Manhattan, where the city lights sparkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet below. But I barely had time to appreciate the luxury before Marcus Sullivan arrived at 7 the next morning, his briefcase bulging with documents and his expression grave. "Emma, we need to move fast," he said, spreading papers across the dining table while Christian poured coffee with the efficiency of someone used to crisis management. Marcus pulled up court filings on his laptop, and my stomach dropped. My family had filed for emergency temporary conservatorship in California just 6 hours ago, claiming I'd disappeared in Paris, exhibiting erratic and dangerous behavior. The betrayal was so calculated, so perfectly timed, that I actually felt a twisted admiration for how thoroughly they'd planned my destruction. According to their petition, I'd abandoned them in Paris after a violent outburst, and they had grave concerns about my mental stability and ability to manage Grandma Rose's estate. My sister Rachel had submitted a statement claiming I'd threatened self-harm, which was such an outrageous lie that I actually laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that made both men look at me with concern. "They're painting you as incompetent so they can control the condo, liquidate it, and split the money 3 ways, Marcus explained, his pen tapping against the mahogany table. The infidelity to every promise we'd made at Grandma's funeral, every tear they'd shed that I'd believed was genuine, made me realize I'd never truly known my own family at all. Christian placed a steady hand on my shoulder, grounding me before my anger could spiral into panic, his presence a reminder that I wasn't alone in this fight anymore. "What's our counter-strategy?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay level even though I wanted to scream, to break something, to make them feel the pain they'd inflicted on me. Marcus smiled, not kindly, but with the sharp-edged satisfaction of a lawyer who loved a good battle. "We're filing an emergency response today with evidence that contradicts every single claim. Medical records showing you're perfectly healthy, bank statements proving financial competence, and affidavits from Christian and his staff confirming your whereabouts and stability," he explained. But there was more. Christian's brother Nathan had filed similar paperwork trying to remove Christian from the company, claiming his impulsive decision to remarry a stranger proved his judgment was compromised. The shocking coordination made me wonder if this was some cosmic joke, 2 families attacking at the exact same moment, or if desperation just followed the same playbook everywhere. "We need documentation of everything. Psychiatric evaluation, financial review, character witnesses, the works," Marcus continued, already scheduling appointments on his phone with the speed of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Christian explained that he was facing a board vote in 3 weeks, and Nathan had been lobbying members for months, planting seeds of doubt about Christian's leadership. The justice we were both seeking required us to be flawless, unimpeachable, more stable and competent than anyone could reasonably expect. "I need you to meet with Dr. Patricia Morrison today. She's a forensic psychiatrist who'll evaluate you and provide testimony that you're of sound mind," Marcus said, sliding her card across to me. The reclaiming of our lives, our dignity, our self-worth wasn't going to be easy or quick. But sitting there in that penthouse war room, I felt something I hadn't felt since Paris. Hope. Over the next week, I became a woman on a mission, submitting to every evaluation and interview Marcus requested with a determination that surprised even myself. Dr. Morrison spent 4 hours with me, asking questions that cut deep into my childhood, my divorce, my relationship with my family, and by the end, she looked genuinely angry on my behalf. "Your family's claims are not only false, they're malicious," she told me, her report documenting my complete psychological stability in language so clinical it was beautiful. Christian was going through similar processes, his own team of experts confirming his business acumen and mental fitness while I watched him work 18-hour days without breaking. We were both fighting for our dignity against people who shared our DNA. People who should have protected us but instead chose greed and revenge. The karma I'd once believed in suddenly felt very real, like the universe was giving us both the tools to fight back. As Marcus prepared for our court date in California, and Christian's board meeting loomed closer, I realized this fake marriage was becoming the realest partnership I'd ever had. The courtroom in downtown Los Angeles felt like stepping into a cage fight, except instead of fists, we were armed with depositions, financial records, and cold, hard evidence. My mother sat 3 rows behind my sibling's lawyer, her face a mask of wounded innocence that would have fooled me 6 months ago, but now I saw it for what it was: a performance. Rachel wouldn't even look at me. Her eyes fixed on her phone like scrolling through Instagram was more important than trying to steal my inheritance and destroy my life. Michael sat rigid beside their attorney, Mr. Pemberton, a silver-haired shark in a $1,000 suit who specialized in conservatorship cases. The betrayal of seeing them united against me, presenting a coordinated front while I stood alone with Marcus, would have broken me before. But Christian had flown in from New York for this, sitting in the gallery like a silent guardian, and somehow that changed everything. Marcus dismantled their case piece by piece with the precision of a surgeon, presenting Dr. Morrison's evaluation that declared me not only stable, but exceptionally resilient given the circumstances. Ms. Hartley has no history of mental illness, no history of financial irresponsibility, and no history of erratic behavior, unless you count trusting her family, which, in hindsight, might have been her only error in judgment, Marcus said, and I swear I saw the judge suppress a smile. We presented bank statements showing I'd managed my finances impeccably for 15 years, building a successful career in event planning before my divorce, maintaining steady income and responsible spending patterns. The shocking contrast between their narrative and reality was so stark that even Mr. Pemberton seemed to be sweating under his expensive cologne. Rachel's statement about me threatening self-harm fell apart when Marcus produced my medical records showing no psychiatric treatment, no emergency room visits, no crisis interventions of any kind. Then came the evidence that changed everything. Airport security footage that Marcus had somehow obtained showing my family's coordinated attack, their calculated theft of my documents, their cold deliberation. Your Honor, this wasn't a concerned family trying to help a troubled relative, Marcus stated, his voice ringing with righteous anger that made my chest tight. This was a premeditated scheme to strand Ms. Hartley overseas, create a false narrative of abandonment, and exploit that narrative to seize assets they have no legal claim to. The vengeance I'd been craving didn't feel hot anymore. It felt like ice, like watching justice pour down on people who'd never expected to face consequences. My mother gasped audibly when the footage played, showing Rachel literally laughing as she canceled my ticket. Michael's smirk as he pocketed my passport. The humiliation I'd felt that day in Paris was now theirs to carry, broadcast on a courtroom screen for a judge and court reporter to witness and record. But Marcus wasn't finished. He'd uncovered text messages between my siblings planning this scheme weeks before we'd even left for Paris, discussing how to handle Emma and secure the Santa Monica property. They knew exactly what they were doing, Your Honor, and they did it with malice aforethought, Marcus continued, and I watched my family's lawyer physically deflate in his chair. The infidelity to every family bond we'd ever shared was now documented evidence, time-stamped and undeniable, showing premeditation that made their claims of concern laughable. Christian caught my eye from the gallery, giving me the smallest nod, and I realized this was what reclaiming your dignity looked like. Not dramatic speeches or emotional outbursts, but cold facts and ironclad evidence. The judge called a brief recess, and I watched my family huddle with their lawyer in desperate whispers, probably realizing for the first time that their perfect plan had completely backfired. When we reconvened, the judge didn't even need to hear closing arguments. Her decision was swift and brutal in its clarity. Petition for conservatorship denied, she stated, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential fraud charges, and I'm awarding Ms. Hartley her legal fees, plus damages for emotional distress. The shocking speed of my victory left me almost dizzy, like I'd been bracing for impact, and suddenly found myself standing on solid ground instead. My mother stood abruptly, her composed mask finally cracking into something ugly and desperate. But the bailiff was already motioning for order. Michael's face had gone ash gray, probably calculating the criminal implications the judge had just dropped on them like a bomb. Rachel was crying now. Real tears, not the manufactured ones she'd used to manipulate people our entire lives. And I felt absolutely nothing watching her suffer. The karma they'd earned was finally collecting its debt, and as Marcus packed up his briefcase with quiet satisfaction, I realized Christian and I were both winning wars our families never thought we could fight. Flying back to New York felt different this time. I wasn't running from something. I was running toward a future I was actively building with my own hands. Christian was buried in his laptop reviewing presentations for his charity gala, an annual event that raised millions for children's hospitals but had become a political battlefield with Nathan. I need this gala to be perfect. It's 2 days before the board meeting, and half the board members will be there watching how I handle everything, he explained, rubbing his temples with exhaustion. His usual event planner had quit suddenly, poached by Nathan with a better offer, leaving Christian scrambling with just 3 weeks until the biggest night of his professional year. I watched him stress over seating charts and donor packets, and suddenly my years of experience in event planning felt like fate had been preparing me for exactly this moment. "Let me help," I said, and the relief that flooded his face told me this wasn't just about the gala anymore. This was about proving we were a team, a partnership, something real even if our marriage certificate was just strategic paperwork. Within days, I'd taken over the entire operation, coordinating with the venue at the Metropolitan Museum, negotiating with caterers, redesigning the program flow to maximize donor engagement and emotional impact. Christian's executive team was skeptical at first. This random woman their boss had suddenly married, now running their most important fundraiser. But I'd been doing this professionally for over a decade. The betrayal my ex-husband had dealt me years ago had actually freed me to build a thriving business, and now those skills were about to save Christian's reputation. I transformed his boring corporate gala into an immersive experience, incorporating stories from actual families helped by the foundation, creating moments that would make board members cry and open their checkbooks. "This is incredible," Christian said, reviewing my proposals with something like awe in his expression. The shocking realization that we actually worked brilliantly together, that this fake arrangement was producing something genuine, hung unspoken between us every time our hands accidentally touched over spreadsheets. His assistant, Jennifer, initially cold and protective of Christian, became my fiercest ally after seeing how I handled a crisis with the florist. "I haven't seen him this energized in 3 years," she confided one afternoon, and I pretended not to notice the knowing look in her eyes. The truth was, Christian and I had fallen into an easy rhythm, working late nights, sharing takeout over budget reviews, laughing at inside jokes about his uptight board members. The reclaiming of joy in both our lives happened so gradually we didn't even notice until Marcus pointed it out during a contract review meeting. "You two realize you're actually acting like a married couple now, right?" he said, smirking over his reading glasses. Christian and I exchanged glances, and something electric passed between us. Something that made my stomach flip in a way that had nothing to do with revenge or justice or strategic partnerships. But Nathan wasn't sitting idle while we built our defense. He started spreading rumors about me, calling me a gold digger, questioning my motives, suggesting Christian's impulsive marriage proved his mental decline. The familia drama escalated when Nathan crashed one of our planning meetings, his contempt barely concealed behind a thin veneer of brotherly concern. "Christian, this is pathetic. You hired a wife off the street and now she's spending foundation money on her little party?" he sneered. And I felt Christian tense beside me. The infidelity to their brotherhood, the way Nathan was weaponizing grief and loneliness against his own flesh and blood, made me see red in a way even my own family's betrayal hadn't. "Actually, Nathan, I've reduced costs by 18% while increasing projected donations by 30%, I said calmly, sliding my budget analysis across the table. "Maybe if you spent less time undermining your brother and more time actually understanding the business, you'd recognize strategic excellence when you saw it." The shocked silence that followed was delicious, Nathan's face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked almost like fear. Christian's hand found mine under the table, squeezing gently, and I squeezed back. A silent communication that said, "We're in this together. We're stronger than they think. We're going to win." Jennifer actually laughed out loud, poorly disguising it as a cough, while Nathan stormed out muttering threats about the board meeting. As the door slammed behind him, Christian turned to me with a grin I'd never seen before, boyish and genuine, and completely unguarded. "Marry me," he joked, then realized what he'd said, and we both burst into slightly hysterical laughter because we were already married. Except it was fake. Except it was starting to feel real. The self-worth I'd been rebuilding since Paris was solidifying into something unshakable, and watching Christian find his own confidence again made me realize this partnership was becoming the best revenge I could have ever imagined. Not against my family, but for myself. Marcus arrived at the penthouse 3 days before the gala with a proposal that made both Christian and I go silent, staring at the legal documents spread across the coffee table. "Make it real," he said simply, tapping the marriage contract we'd signed that first desperate night in New York. "Right now, you're technically married, but it's a private contract. Nathan can argue it's not legitimate, that it's just a business arrangement, which actually proves his point." Christian and I exchanged glances, and I could see him calculating the same risks and benefits I was processing in real time. The shocking logic was sound. A legal marriage, registered with the state, with all the official documentation, would be unimpeachable proof of Christian's stability and commitment. But it also meant binding ourselves together in ways that went beyond contracts and prenups, creating something that couldn't be easily undone if things went wrong. "For how long?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt, while Christian leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, clearly wrestling with the same question. Marcus pulled out another document, this one more complex, with clauses and sub-clauses that made my head spin just looking at them. 1 year, renewable by mutual consent, with ironclad protections for both parties, he explained, walking us through terms that protected my autonomy, my assets, my image, and my freedom to walk away. Christian would provide housing, a salary for my event planning work, and a settlement if either of us terminated the agreement early. The betrayal both of us had experienced made us hyper-aware of protecting ourselves, of never being vulnerable to someone else's manipulation again. "Your family can't touch you if you're married, Emma. Spousal protections make conservatorship almost impossible to pursue," Marcus added, and that sealed it for me. Christian was quiet for a long moment, his blue eyes searching my face for something I wasn't sure I was ready to name. "I need you to understand. This isn't just about the board meeting anymore," he said slowly, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept locked down. "If we do this, if we make it legal and real, I need to know you're not just doing this as payback against your family, or because you need protection." The dignity he was showing me, the respect for my autonomy even in this bizarre situation, made my chest ache with feelings I definitely wasn't ready to examine. "I'm doing this because I want to," I admitted, surprising myself with the truth. "Because somehow in the middle of all this chaos and revenge and family drama, you became someone I actually trust, and that's worth more to me than any contract." The shocking vulnerability of that confession hung in the air between us, and I watched something shift in Christian's expression, something soft and almost hopeful. We signed the papers that night, Marcus witnessing with a satisfied smile that suggested he'd planned this outcome all along, and by morning we were legally married in the eyes of New York State. Christian gave me a ring, not the fake one from our contract, but a simple platinum band that somehow felt more meaningful than any diamond. "We're a team now," he said, sliding it onto my finger, and the weight of it felt like both an anchor and wings somehow. The infidelity and lies we'd both endured from our families had taught us what real loyalty looked like, and we were building it brick by brick with honesty and strategic partnership. The reclaiming of our lives required this leap of faith, this choice to trust each other when trust seemed like the most dangerous thing we could offer anyone. Jennifer sent out a press release that afternoon. "Christian Beaumont and his wife Emma cordially invite you to the annual Children's Hospital Foundation Gala," and I watched social media explode with speculation and commentary about the mysterious woman who'd captured the grieving billionaire's heart. The next 2 days were a blur of final preparations, last-minute crises, and growing anticipation that felt electric in the air around us. Nathan tried one more sabotage attempt, calling major donors to suggest the gala was poorly organized. But my reputation and Christian's reassurances held firm. My family called too, My mother, suddenly syrupy sweet, asking to reconcile now that she'd heard about my marriage to Christian Beaumont through the society pages. The humiliation of their transparent greed was almost funny now. Their sudden interest in my well-being coinciding perfectly with my association with billions of dollars. "Tell them I'm not available," I said to Jennifer, who'd taken to screening my calls with protective efficiency. Christian overheard and squeezed my shoulder, understanding without words what that rejection cost me and how necessary it was. The karma of watching my family scramble while I built something real with someone who actually valued me felt like justice served cold and sweet. As we stood in the penthouse the night before the gala, reviewing final details while the city sparkled below us, I realized I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The gala was a triumph beyond anything I'd imagined. The great hall at the Met transformed into a wonderland of soft gold lighting and testimonials that had board members wiping tears by the second course. Christian's speech about his late wife's passion for children's health care was raw and honest, showing vulnerability that proved strength rather than weakness, and I watched Nathan's supporters shift uncomfortably in their seats. Donors opened their checkbooks with enthusiasm we hadn't seen in years, the event raising 40% more than last year's gala. And I stood beside Christian, feeling like we'd just won the first battle in a war that was far from over. "You did this," Christian whispered to me during the standing ovation, and the pride in his voice made something inside me glow warm and bright. The shocking success wasn't just about the money or the optics. It was proof that together, we were formidable. That our partnership created something neither of us could have achieved alone. But the real victory came 3 days later at the emergency board meeting, where Nathan had been so confident he'd have the votes to remove Christian from leadership. Marcus and I sat in the gallery watching Christian present his case. Financial reports showing record growth, testimonials from employees about his leadership, and the gala's success as evidence of his renewed focus and stability. "My brother claims I'm unstable because I've found happiness again," Christian said, his voice steady and clear. "He claims my marriage proves poor judgment, but I'd argue that building a partnership with someone who shares my values and strengthens my vision is exactly the kind of judgment this company needs." Nathan's face was red with barely controlled rage, watching his carefully constructed narrative crumble like sand. The betrayal he'd attempted against his own brother was now exposing his own inadequacies as a leader, his jealousy and manipulation clear to everyone in that boardroom. The vote wasn't even close. 11-2 in Christian's favor, with only Nathan and one loyal ally voting for removal. "Motion denied," the chairman announced, and I watched relief wash over Christian's features like he'd been holding his breath for months and could finally exhale. Nathan stormed out without a word, his humiliation complete. His attempted coup crushed so thoroughly, it would be career suicide to try again. Christian found me afterward in the lobby, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than strictly professional, and I didn't care who saw or what they thought. The reclaiming of his company, his reputation, his life. I'd been part of that, and the satisfaction was intoxicating. "We did it," he murmured against my hair, and I realized he wasn't just talking about the board vote anymore. He was talking about everything. The revenge, the justice, the karma we'd manifested together. Meanwhile, back in California, my own victory was playing out in ways I'd never anticipated but deeply appreciated. The district attorney had indeed filed fraud charges against my siblings for their conservatorship scheme, and their lawyer had advised them to settle rather than face trial. Rachel called me sobbing, begging for forgiveness, claiming she'd been led astray by Michael, which was such obvious manipulation it almost made me laugh. Michael sent a formal apology through his attorney, offering to sign over any claims to Grandma's estate if I'd drop my support for the prosecution. My mother showed up at the penthouse unannounced, somehow charming her way past building security, demanding to see her daughter and fix this misunderstanding. The infidelity to every value Grandma Rose had tried to teach us was complete. They weren't sorry for hurting me. They were sorry they'd gotten caught and faced consequences. Christian was with me when building security called up about my mother, and he saw the way my hands started shaking, the old trauma trying to resurface. "You don't owe them anything," he said firmly, taking my trembling hands in his steady ones. "Not forgiveness, not access, not even an explanation. You get to choose what happens next." The self-worth I'd rebuilt brick by brick told me he was right. And I made my choice in that moment with absolute certainty. "Tell her to leave," I said to security, my voice clear and strong. "Tell her if she attempts contact again, I'll file for a restraining order." Christian smiled at me with something that looked like respect, and maybe something deeper, something neither of us was quite ready to name yet. As we watched the security cameras show my mother leaving the building, her entitled outrage visible even through the grainy footage, I felt the last chains of family obligation finally break and fall away. The vengeance I'd craved wasn't about making them suffer. It was about freeing myself completely and watching them fade into irrelevance while I built something beautiful with someone who actually deserved my loyalty. 6 months into our legal marriage, Christian and I moved to his estate in the Hamptons for the summer, a sprawling property with ocean views that made me understand why billionaires never wanted to share their wealth. The distance from Manhattan gave us space to figure out what we were becoming. Business partners who'd saved each other's lives, yes, but also something more complicated that neither of us knew how to name. We fell into domestic routines that felt startlingly normal. Morning coffee on the terrace, working side by side in his home office, evening walks on the beach where we talked about everything except what was actually happening between us. The betrayal we'd both survived had made us cautious about vulnerability, about admitting that fake feelings might be turning real, about risking the one partnership that actually worked. Christian had hired me officially as director of events for Beaumont hotels, and I was thriving in ways my old event planning business had never allowed, managing galas and corporate retreats with a budget and resources I'd only dreamed about before. Then my family made one final, desperate attempt to get to me. They showed up at a hotel opening I was managing in the Hamptons, Rachel and Michael in their best clothes, armed with tears and apologies. "Emma, please, we've lost everything. Our reputations, our jobs. Mom's having a breakdown," Rachel begged, her mascara already running in perfectly calculated streams. Michael stood behind her looking appropriately contrite, probably coached by yet another lawyer on how to appear remorseful without admitting legal liability. The shocking audacity of them showing up at my workplace, trying to manipulate me in front of Christian's employees and business partners, made my blood boil with rage I'd learned to channel into icy control. "You lost everything because you tried to destroy me," I said quietly, aware of curious eyes watching this family drama unfold. "That's called consequences. And I'm not your escape route from karma." Christian appeared at my elbow, his presence solid and protective without being controlling, letting me fight my own battle while making it clear I wasn't alone. "I think you should leave," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to being obeyed without question. "Emma's made her position clear, and if you contact her again, we'll pursue harassment charges." Rachel's tears turned instantly to anger, the mask slipping to reveal the entitled rage underneath. "You think you're so special now? Married to money, living in your fancy houses?" she spat, her true feelings finally breaking through the performance. "You were always Grandma's favorite, always acting like you were better than us, and now you're proving it by abandoning your own family." The infidelity to truth was breathtaking. They'd abandoned me, they'd plotted against me, they'd tried to steal from me, and somehow in their twisted narrative, I was the villain for refusing to be victimized again. "Leave now, or I'm calling the police," I said, pulling out my phone, and something in my expression must have convinced them I was serious because they finally backed away. Michael grabbed Rachel's arm, practically dragging her toward the parking lot while she shouted insults that made guests turn and stare. The humiliation should have been mine, but instead I felt nothing but relief, like watching a toxic chapter of my life finally close for good. Christian's hand found the small of my back, a gesture of support that sent warmth through my entire body. "You handled that perfectly," he murmured, and the admiration in his voice made me realize how far I'd come from the broken woman crying on that airport bench. The dignity I'd reclaimed wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about knowing my own worth regardless of whether they acknowledged it. That night, we sat on the beach with wine and silence, watching stars emerge as the sun set over the Atlantic in spectacular shades of orange and gold. "Do you ever regret it?" Christian asked suddenly, and I knew he meant all of it. The fake marriage that became real, the revenge that became justice, the strategic partnership that became something neither of us knew how to define. "Not for a second," I admitted, turning to find him already watching me with those piercing blue eyes that saw too much. Do you? He was quiet for a long moment, his hand finding mine in the sand, our fingers intertwining with the ease of practice and something deeper. I regret that we needed tragedy to find each other, he said slowly, his thumb tracing circles on my palm, but I don't regret a single moment since that airport. The shocking honesty of it hung between us, and I realized we were standing at a crossroads. Our 1-year contract was approaching its end, and we'd have to decide whether this was still about payback and protection, or if it had become something worth keeping. The self-worth I'd rebuilt told me I deserved real love, not strategic arrangements, but looking at Christian, I wondered if maybe we'd accidentally built both. The 1-year anniversary of our contract arrived on a Tuesday morning in September, marked only by Marcus sending updated paperwork for us to review and sign if we wanted to renew. Christian and I sat across from each other at the breakfast table, the documents between us like a third presence neither of us wanted to acknowledge directly. We should talk about this, he said finally, his coffee going cold while he studied my face for clues I wasn't sure I was ready to give. The shocking reality was that somewhere between revenge and justice, between fake smiles for the press and real laughter in private moments, we'd built something that terrified me more than my family's betrayal ever had. I'd promised myself after my divorce that I'd never again tie my worth to someone else's approval, never again make myself vulnerable to abandonment. But Christian had somehow slipped past every defense I'd carefully constructed. "What do you want?" I asked, deflecting because I wasn't brave enough yet to say what I wanted out loud. He smiled at that, a sad, knowing expression that said he saw right through my avoidance tactics. "I want you to stay because you want to, not because you need protection or revenge or a job," Christian said, his honesty cutting through all the careful distance we'd maintained. "I want to know if this," he gestured between us, encompassing the shared life we'd built, "is real for you, the way it's become real for me." The betrayal I'd experienced had made me an expert at spotting lies, and there wasn't a single false note in Christian's voice, just raw vulnerability that matched the terror and hope warring in my own chest. "It's real," I whispered, the admission feeling like jumping off a cliff without knowing if I could fly. "It's been real for months, and that scares me more than anything my family ever did to me, because losing this, losing you, would actually break me in ways they never could." Christian stood and crossed to my side of the table, pulling me up and into his arms with a desperation that felt like finally coming home after a long exile. "Then don't lose me," he said against my hair, his voice rough with emotion. "Let's tear up the contract and do this for real. No terms, no renewal clauses, just two people who found each other in the wreckage and built something worth keeping. The reclaiming of joy, of trust, of the possibility of love after trauma. It was the ultimate revenge against everyone who'd tried to break us." I kissed him then, properly, for the first time since our staged wedding photos. And it was nothing like the careful performance we'd maintained for cameras and boards. This was real and messy and perfect, tasting like coffee and promise and the future we were choosing together. We didn't sign the renewal papers. We shredded them instead, choosing to stay not because a contract demanded it, but because we wanted to, and that distinction made all the difference. Marcus was philosophical when we told him, claiming he'd known all along we'd end up here, which I suspected was partly true, and partly his lawyer ego talking. Nathan had moved to the London office after his failed coup, occasionally sending passive-aggressive emails that Christian now deleted without reading. My family's fraud charges had been resolved with plea deals and probation, their reputations in tatters, their financial situations ruined by legal fees they couldn't afford. I'd sold Grandma Rose's condo and used part of the money to start my own boutique event firm, Hartley and Beaumont Events, with Christian as my silent partner and biggest cheerleader. The infidelity they'd shown to family bonds had freed me to create my own definition of family, one based on choice and loyalty rather than blood. Jennifer became my business partner and closest friend. Marcus handled all our legal matters with avuncular satisfaction, and Christian's executive team embraced me as one of their own. A year after tearing up that contract, Christian proposed again, this time with a diamond, on the same beach where we'd decided to stay together, with no audience except the sunset and seagulls. "I want to marry you for real this time," he said, down on one knee in the sand like we were characters in a romance novel instead of two damaged people who'd found each other in an airport terminal. No contracts, no strategies, just us choosing each other every single day for the rest of our lives. The shocking beauty of second chances, of finding love in the ruins of betrayal, of building something stronger than anything revenge could have given me. It overwhelmed me in the best possible way. I said yes before he'd even finished asking, tears streaming down my face. But this time they were tears of joy instead of humiliation. The karma that had brought us together, the justice we'd fought for, the vengeance we'd claimed. It had all led to this moment where I was finally, completely, undeniably free. We got married again 6 months later in a small ceremony with people who actually loved us. And as I walked down the aisle toward Christian, I couldn't help but think that the best revenge really was living well, and I was living extraordinarily well. So here's what I need to know. Have you ever experienced that moment where family betrayal forced you to completely rebuild who you are? Drop your story in the comments below because I genuinely want to hear how you handled it, whether you chose revenge or just walked away. And most importantly, whether you regret your decision or if it set you free. Did karma catch up with the people who backstabbed you? Or are you still waiting for justice to show up? Tell me about the moment you realized that self-worth can't come from people who never valued you in the first place, and whether reclaiming your dignity felt as powerful as it looks from the outside. What would you have done in my situation at that airport? Would you have taken the billionaire's deal, or would fear have kept you trapped? I want to know if you've ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-preservation, and which one won. Have you experienced that shocking realization that the people who should protect you are actually the ones trying to destroy you? Share your truth in the comments, whether it's about infidelity, family drama, financial betrayal, or any situation where you had to fight for what was rightfully yours. Did you find your own version of Alexander, someone who showed up exactly when you needed them? Or did you have to be your own hero? And here's the real question that keeps me up at night. Do you think forgiveness is overrated? Or am I just cold for cutting my family off completely? Your stories matter. Your experiences validate others who are going through similar battles. And honestly, I learned something from every single comment you leave. Whether you're team revenge, team forgiveness, or team I'm still figuring it out, drop your perspective below because this community thrives on real talk about the messy, complicated reality of family relationships gone wrong. Tell me what justice looks like to you. Is it legal victories, personal success, or just the peace that comes from walking away? And if you're currently in the middle of your own family betrayal situation, what's the one piece of advice you wish someone had given you before everything exploded? If this story resonated with you, if it made you think differently about revenge and dignity and what it really means to reclaim your power, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now. Turn on notifications so you never miss the provocative, real, unfiltered stories about family drama, betrayal, justice, and the complicated path to healing that nobody talks about honestly. This channel isn't about sugarcoating the hard stuff or pretending family is always worth saving. It's about the truth, the struggle, and the ultimate liberation that comes from choosing yourself. Subscribe for more insights that'll challenge everything you thought you knew about loyalty, payback, and what you really owe to people who share your DNA but not your values. Your story isn't over yet, and neither is mine. So let's keep this conversation going, together.